right. All set up. I will begin by simply stating it is always a joy to be able to read poems in, I don't know, just today's life, everything that's going on. I'm eternally grateful that I'm able to have some time and bandwidth and the work of literature to settle me in an otherwise contentious world. My last few streams, I've read entirely poetry and translation, some mostly contemporary works, but from across the world, no strict themes really. Although last week I did unintentionally stumble into a theme of, women writers who wrote about the bestial and such. But I want to continue these streams as long as I can. I mean, at some point, I'm going to run out of, I guess, new translated literature to read. And so at that point, I will probably, uh, I don't know what I'll do. Haven't thought that far ahead. But until then, uh, I'm tremendously happy to have this opportunity and to chat with you all about it. Language. So the reason why I love to celebrate and to give time for poetry is because language really shapes how we feel. And when you don't necessarily understand a language, I think that triggers a certain fear and response. When you don't understand a culture, that triggers a fear. But fear isn't something that should immobilize us, jeopardize our ability to bridge communities or to gain some sense of friendship or camaraderie. And so when I think about translated poetry, it isn't necessarily about what gets lost in translation, but rather I try to frame it in terms of what gets gained in translation. Sure, a poem especially might not be reflected 100% accurately, but the poet becomes a name that I wouldn't have known otherwise. A poem might not be translated word for word in a way that exactly matches the author's language. Some words, some phrases are simply untranslatable into English. And yet, without the effort, I would we would, as readers, never know the experiences of these individuals in their communities throughout the world. Learning from unfamiliar voices and listening to the cultural practice that translated poetry invokes is really the means that we have to connect each other. And I hope to continue that as long as I can. Today, I am reading entirely Mexican poets. And the reason for this is because as of this morning, uh, the state of Jalisco in Mexico, containing Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta, all number of wonderful and beautiful places in Mexico, is under siege by cartel violence because the Mexican government killed the one of the leaders of the top cartels in Mexico. My sister lives down there, and as a result, I'm feeling rather sentimental. So the only way that I can really process that grief um, is to console in the way that I know, which is to read Mexican poetry in this case. That's kind of how I don't know, it's how we share grief. Um, it's not necessarily about the literal or physical manifestation of, lift up my boulder at the same weight, but rather uh, joining in a moment, even if it's in silence, recognizing that there is pain and we'll get through this. The first poet that I will read from Mexico is Veronica Bolcao, and her work Arcana and Other Poems. This is published by Shearsman Books and translated by Luis Ingelmo and Michael Smith. Labyrinth. I would like to be flying, only a signal in the wind, a fragile sketch that, a light, I walk and in submerged shadow, a full gaze. With my life, I write the traces of a star under a mute dawned night. There is a flight that opens the light in the internal, a sensitive walking of the alert heart. Other times. The will is not the time of the seasons. The will is in a hurry, and it is like a new time, different from flowering and days. The will looks at itself intensely, but it has no eyes for the stars or the palette of the horizon. The will is a hollow cavities, but it doesn't want to know them. It has the eyes of the desert, but it came to invent water for stones and to recover from death at every instant, to frighten the past in the muscle. The will is alone, is brave, alien to grace and to the internal abandoned hope. It has the eyes of the desert which it won't accept, and of the void to which it frightens away, and is so different from the earth and its sand, its evening and its calm. Its speed is 1,000 masts and towers which claim to be taller than other towers, but it doesn't want, no, the interior of man, or what speaks inside him, in dreams or in silence. It turns the wound of love into war, and pushes with its anger, progresses, but truth is received on a humble and slow day. Hands without dreams obey reality the way time is received. Things that occur on the skin, pain, death in the desert, the savor of a story burning in the silence. The majority of this book is actually a series of poems connected through the Tarot Major Arcana. And so through themes like the Fool, the King, the Shepherd, the Moon, the Sun, so on and so forth. I felt it to be an injustice to read only a select few of those, just in line with the spirit of the author. If you are to write a series of poems like that, then they are all in conversation with each other. And as much as I would love to, perhaps one day I'll start reading longer poems on here, but it doesn't feel, I don't necessarily feel prepared to read 52 sequenced poems in a single breath or sitting. Especially not today, as this morning I played soccer and I am feeling quite weary as a result because it was raining the entire time. So, yes, I'm running around a soccer field with this slow level tread because the I'm just getting blown up with texts about, my sister's apartment building got blown up because she lived over a gas station, and that was the easiest target for cartel to make a big boom. So that was particularly delightful. Thank you so much. I hope that the quiet panic just adds a flair of drama to the poetry reading. She's safe, to be clear, she's safe as of this moment, and she's been in communication with me, but it's still just a very unsettling thing to realize that there is absolutely nothing I can do. That all said, um, I'll read this by Maria Baranda, Ficticia, translated by Joshua Edwards. This is also a Shearsman book. Shearsman has done a lot of Mexican contemporary Mexican poets in translation, especially Mexican women, which I'm really grateful for because there are so many wonderful names that I wouldn't have found otherwise. Um, so Baranda is a poet who also writes in very long sequences. And so this book, I think, is actually just three sequences, and they all have, 10 or 11 parts to them. So I'll be taking selections from each of these. This is Roman numeral 7. Who remains? Who do you leave behind your yellowed atlas when you go? Your parasol and hat, vine on the hill like a victory of your new century, small goat like a whisper that corresponds to your desire. You await your incredible city full of echoing voices. Its constituents don't register in your memory. They don't quake for you. They don't protect you. Slow now are the angry pages, where alone they scrub their pornography. You'll find no trace of them in a raindrop, no trace. Now all of us people, holes without memory, would live below ground looking in the subsoil for a word, perhaps a fragment of fortune to allow us to speak openly about a secret syllable. This war and the sea's overwhelming saltpeter are strange, and not ours. Insects nourished by someone else's substance, they imitate a dry leaf's rare perfection. They consume. There are larvae and nymphs. They bore a hill in the tree for their young, shims, extensions, part of a faith with rotten roots. They expand. They consume a portion of an apocryphal paradise and are sustained. They eat with pleasure. They are nourished by meat and fresh fruit. Then the sea comes to rest far from dreams and echoes. Open the door. Use your hands to untie the fields and flower gardens, the blue forests of tamarinds. The bee will come and steal your knife. The tapir will come to lick your wound. The eagle will come to remove your light. And you will lose your regal head, ruler of your own blunder. Something that I love about Baranda's work, and I actually have in my earlier attempts at doing regular poetry readings, I have another reading of hers from a singular long poem titled Nightmare Running in a Field of Something, um, maybe a field of dreams. But I just really love this author. She somehow manages to connect this like very dreamlike state, the invocation of all sorts of, elemental sources of mysticism, and will tie them all together to these feelings of, anxiety and grief in present day, just thinking about wars or gas prices or, what have you. And so you'll be reading these poems and hearing her writing these lines of the sea is coming forth toward you and you have nowhere to run. And then the next line will be something like, the local elections did not go in our favor. They never do. And it's just one of those things that it humbles me as a poet to realize that there are people who just think in connections that I will never uh, be able to feel like authentic or natural to myself. I think that's why I love poetry so much, frankly, is that it is a constantly humbling mechanism for me. This next poet that I'll read is Coral Brasho. Coral Brasho, translated by Forrest Gander. This is by New Directions. I just love the cover art design of this too. It's just fantastic. But this title, or this book, is titled It Must Be a Misunderstanding. Like the beak of another bird and the head that follows the beak. I miss the colors, she says, but it's just the beginning, they tell her. We have to wait. They're there, hidden. They are black curtains, and each one is like a forest, drawn very, very tight, because it's nearly nighttime. Until when? Until whenever they return? That you'll come to know in time. But don't look, they tell her. Let it come. Let who come? Are they trees too? But better not say what they are not. Someone is seated on the stage. It's not that exactly. It's what makes a chair, what you have in your hand or what's already happened. The thing that has a seat, she says. And if someone goes quiet, that's not the reason, but it's those lines in the palm leaf that are blocking it. If it's a big bird opening its beak because it's got something to announce, or maybe it's shaped more like a coconut or something else, but no, it's not that. It's your responsibility, someone says. I think it must be the leaves that no one announces. It's for your own good. Okay, but they're already showing up. Since when? They must be afraid because otherwise that will come clear soon enough, like the beak of another bird and the head that follows the beak. But it seems to have stopped. There's a line there, but where does it come from? Don't hide. Get down from there, someone says. Brascio is a poet who very much so plays in the realm of uh, illogicality. I don't really know if that's a word, but I also don't really care. Um, there's not really a sense of strict adherence to sense making. And so when I read a poem like that, I think it's as much about language as it is about the literal image meaning of the poem. So many questions. Who's there? What's going to happen? What's going on? What is that? Um, but the subject is rarely actually addressed. There are some nouns involved, a chair, a bird with a beak, another bird, but the ultimate question in the poem really, A, you know that there is a question, but you don't really know what the question is. But B, uh, you don't know what the question's about. You don't, and typically when we ask a question, there's something that we are looking for in terms of an answer. So with poems like this, I have to imagine that it becomes less about the conversation of the poem between page and reader and more about the conversation of the poem between language and poetry. Um, it's fun. It kind of plays with that understanding of, what's the point of communication and what can poetry really do to augment the ways that we communicate with each other. Intuitions. Sure, everything moves. Everything changes form, place. Everything loses the outline that keeps it to its particular space, to its particular face, to the sound that harbors its name. But a note is something else altogether. A note can't change. A note is within you, and if you sing it wrongly, it will cringe, and everything is ruined. It undoes everything. That's what a note's like, and it has to be respected. A note is what it is. There are no words, but you know that melody has something to say to us from its delicate and precise intimate intimations within reach, a space of feeling, which another melody tentatively questions and recalibrates with new features, which the first one takes up and deepens, and the second expands, enriching it. The two face off and they harmonize, complementing each other. You know, sensing it, feeling it, that all of it comes to be a clear and beautiful mode of speaking, a joyous means for understanding, something that conveys and arouses warmth and nobility, that surrounds and welcomes you, that brings you calm. So I really do love, I mean, all of these poets I've picked today and will continue to share this theme of, being from Mexico. But my favorite part about it is that many of them come from Mexico City as well, and they have this kind of unique approach to cities that I think is very emblematic to what Mexico City represents in the broader scheme of things, which is, it's massive, it's sprawling, it's so unabashedly proud of its position and culture within the world. Um, And while it maintains that kind of busyness that just sheer population density will evoke, there's also a sense of kind of fragmentation, not of like disparate culture or disparate, communities, but fragmentation of the self. And I think that's been a common theme in contemporary Mexican poetry that's being translated is just this kind of recognition that the language itself is so insoluble for what they're trying to contend with and evoke in everyday life. My next book that I will be reading is Diorama by Rocio Cerron. This is another all of these books also, mind you, are bilingual, so if you do enjoy reading in Spanish, um, they that's available for you in these options. I like the bilingual books personally, even if I can't understand the language, just because sometimes it's really fascinating to look at a word and realize that, oh wow, that's a word that exists in English and also has to be translated, and what a weird thing, that language has to do. Yes, it very much so is. Thank you, Birdie. Um, I think like right here, so this particular book does uh translation in a completely separate half of the book as opposed to, page by page. You can't really see that. I apologize. A, I'm probably moving too fast for the camera to catch up, and B, I don't really have a strong camera. So, uh, sucks for trying to display beautiful literature. Instead, I'm just going to open up to this beginning of another long sequence just titled 112, and I'll read a few sections from this. 112 Steps as Escape. Talent of one who knows long oral winters, vocal stammering, rhizome unfurled in fugitive leaf. How else could hatred speak? Face or a cross of an alphabet resolved by rending, double entry, game and ellipse. Pray not the Our Father or the Ave Maria in your accent name all that is. On top of the leather hide the hard anatomy, its breast already unguarded. Terror smears the shoulder. We pray on the beach La Herradura, elucidated fears. Piece by piece, geography checks off hand carved nightsticks, mouth of the well, sniper shot, organ. 20th century embossed by hand, no hinges, central beveled mirror, solid legs, the decoration somewhat severe, the epic's black marble. Tell yourself it's an heirloom for experts. Then laughter dispelled all tinsel failure and anguish. We named the letter N to contradict time and censure. Descend from the eye of light, radial tracery. May the saints devour your years. The carousel turns, drilled through by bullets. Not even the fallen leaves or sun's rays speak in captive voices. Behind the immovable, the puppet masters and a pair of blind old men, suffocating, air enthroned. The seafoam turns. Pihuayo peels, arasa fruit, mute remains where the word's certainty took root. Bang on the door. Descend, clench, pulp ring, prophetic knot, grinding where hatred hangs, then the birds slept. An intense geography of spikes awaits the mouth, no jailer, no hangman, no debtor, no one pressing down on the infant's patalic chest. Raise up the night, Saturday or Friday, rigging that adjusts the strength of the blow. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. The notation served as a medium, cross-referenced with the report scores or an outline where the page springs forth calligraphic. Dark green bundle of branches where scarcely few crack secret orifices where the era grows short. Eyes! I'm telling you, alphabetical order will eventually disappear. The chest's lingering pentagonal autumns hinge between gesture and sound. Articulation. On the Black Mountain, they share the same curtain black with blood. It doesn't matter whether it comes from the sea, river, mountain range, communal feast of scraps, cadaver. Here, the people are free to come and go as they please. The birth of forgetting bestowed on the surfeit of spectacle, historical periodicity, the expert will say, dilapidated aristocratic language aching to the core, transoceanic babbling sauntering among houses of storm and howling, the drunkest letter in Spanish, nuclear and metronomic ad libitum heat strokes, the pronouncement made, a ringing anvil crushes the tympanic cavity, practiced chord of blackest horror where our century is kept. Um, yeah, sorry, delightful kind of tongue twist of language there. Uh, I think the theme that I've kind of unknowingly walked into today is that this response by contemporary Mexican women poets who their response to misogynistic silencing and machismo cultures is to just go off with language and to dare to not make sense, just using words and trying to evoke a meaning of cacophony as opposed to a direct linear sentence. And it's this kind of beautiful representation of the difficulty of re-entering the world, um, mirrored by the difficulty of enunciating a language. So, um, yeah, I've been enjoying these. I really should actually like plan out the poems I'm going to read in advance. I do plan out the poets, but sometimes I think the heart and soul just kind of uh, guides you to the right things to read at any given moment. I'm glad y'all liked that. Um, it's fun. It's complicated poetry, I think, gets a lot of bad rap, or I should say, perhaps less complicated and more difficult to adhere to a linearity. Um, but I think that's the joy of reading these poems aloud or listening to them read aloud is that you don't necessarily need to understand, you know, on a line to line basis what the poem is trying to convince you of, because the poem's not even really trying to convince you of anything. Um, you kind of just need to catch a vibe, and I think that's what oral is in spoken aloud poetry performance really does for those types of works. Another poet, next book. This is an Edinburgh notebook by Valerie Meher Caso, translated by Michelle Gil Montero. Um, I actually haven't looked to see if there is an Edinburgh, Mexico. Um, I I really don't think there would be, but it's in the same vein of how like every US state has like a Rome, like I wonder if there is. Uh, I guess I wouldn't be entirely surprised, but I kind of just want to stumble upon it at some point. This particular book, I do believe the author got like a writing residency or spent some time in Edinburgh, but wouldn't it be funny if they were talking about Edinburgh, Mexico the whole time, or like Edinburgh, Uruguay? Echo. Oh, and just for visibility's sake, uh, whereas the previous poems I've read have all been pretty standard free verse, long form lyric. Um, Caso really does the kind of prose like block in a lot of her works, and I don't know. I really like the change up. Echo. Once the ocean is spent, its hollow converts to steel, and all the oddly propped boats are ready to tumble onto that empty plate. I have no sun in this world, no ocean. What can I do with all these daggers heaped where the mountain used to be? Some piece of the story has left us shaking as a great wind jingles the bangles on a frightful crown, has dragged the rain and waterfalls to a distant atmosphere. Water's time is captive. In it, the groom clenches his eyes and takes in the night of another body, and their breath flickeringly lights the cabin, the palm trees, the people drinking in silence. It brightens his face like a planet, light enough to burst the sphere and spill its liquid down the street where the sea is still evaporating and the boat, with no way to steady itself, lurches. On their bloody evening, the trees stir, the broken jugs rejoin along empty paths. There is a mountain made of teeth. The last of our water hovers around the king in his bath. No river feeds into the sea. Its runnels are just writing stories about water, reedy paradises, cities looped in canals, debauchement tales, and to think that you and I were right there, standing, when you were alive in Vera Cruz, in that effluvium where the sand shone blue and the orange moon had the glint of a good omen. On that rocky reef into the bay, we watched the bride melt in the milk of clouds and new stars. On the mountain, the trees could stand witness. Now is the echo. The landscape is a big spoon, and the words are still searching themselves alone in the storm. I just want to be unraveled by this author like all the time. I love the fact that she's willing to redefine the image of a mountain 3 different times in a single poem, going from an absent mountain with a pile of daggers to, what was it? A mountain made of teeth, and then just a normal mountain with trees on it. Um, I just think there are so many authors who get taught at this age that images are like, once you announce an image to the page, you have this certain obligation to stick with it. And I think we forget that just as language is fungible, so too are images. Like I could say, my dog is wearing an orange jacket right now. And then I could say, my dog is completely buck naked right now. And then I could tell you I don't have a dog. Um, and I think all three of those conjure such a special kind of image in your head that, like, I don't know, when a poem does it, it's just really fun to, um, it makes me fold in a way that wants to just listen to the poem. In the foreground, the four who face me, glaring, an astronaut, a shepherdess poet, a village pianist, a woman in furs who rests her chin on the palm of her hand. It would be better to address them familiarly. You have all witnessed or loved space. You're no strangers to fury, and with your bare feet you seem more visible and at hand than freshly baked bread. You're crushingly sad like me, but you have faith in something almost like salt. You, second from the right, have tied your polka dot tie with a solemn rite, like your own execution, which you predicted in a poem. You, the astronaut on the far left, smile like a child because you're ready to launch. You'll know the moon from above, and that knowledge, incommunicable, will be recorded only in the odd expression you wear when you return. I linger for a while in your eyes, almost black, and clarity engulfs me like an October day. Everything is atmosphere. I've stopped looking at pictures to think of you, of how you're neither in front of me nor with the others. I think of your body's silence, which clarified the likeness of things, and suddenly I regret the adverse currents raising waves like buildings to block the kids from escaping the ports. I regret paths that never cross, and I regret, above all, impossible love. Who doesn't regret impossible love? God. Um, I yeah, I just really love her work. I wish more of it was translated into English. I understand that, not everyone's allowed to get a million books translated into English simply because if there was a surplus of translators and a surplus of publishers interested in publishing translated poetry and a surplus of presses interested in translating poetry generally and a surplus of readers interested in reading poetry generally, then we would not be in a world where I have to sit here on a Sunday afternoon reading these poems aloud to you all, pleading, please, for my life and yours, for the Sandy's sake, read more poetry, or just listen to me read you more poetry, because it really does, I think, hopefully improve your days. Um, Not to over import myself, but more so just over import poetry because I do really think it helps anything. I just have one poet left who I want to read, and mostly because I think it would be remiss to do a reading of Mexican poets without the inimitable Octavio Paz, who is probably one of the most well translated poets in, I would say, in relatively modern history. Certainly one of, if not the most acclaimed poet from Mexico. Um, if you haven't read much of Paz before, um, really throve in the world of metaphysics, and perhaps gave, yes, I'm so glad. Um, Perhaps gave the permission to these kind of long, ethereal women writers to write their kind of pages long manifesto esque ramblings in the same light, just gave that permission because man, does Paz just like to go on and on and on. And I love it for him. I am a sucker for his poetry. However, uh, it the challenge that if I were ever in the position, if I were, instructing him, the challenge I would always give him would be try and fit this in half a page. Really try. See what happens. I don't know if that's necessarily a useful or fruitful endeavor. I mean, sometimes it isn't actually rewarding to write in a way that is contraindicative to, your natural state of language, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it illuminates things about your writerly habits and traditions that you hadn't known otherwise. A fun fact about Octavio Paz, and then I'll get on with the reading, um, is when I first started buying my own furniture as a young adult, I had all these like really shitty that I still have, like black IKEA bookshelves. And to spruce them up, I would just paint a poetry lyric on the side and pauses on two of my bookshelves that are still in this room, actually. One directly there, which you can't see, and then uh, the little table down. Sorry, I can't tilt my wrist that far because it's still recovering from surgery. That little end table with the record player on top of it has another pause quote on it. This is a tale of two gardens, a house, a garden are not places. They spin, they come and go. Their apparitions open another space in space, another time in time. Their eclipses are not abdications. The vivacity of one of those moments would burn us if it lasted a moment more. We are condemned to kill time, so we die, little by little. A garden is not a place. Down a path of reddish sand, we enter a drop of water, drink green clarities from its center. We climb the spiral of hours to the tip of the day, descend to the last burning of its ember, mumbling river, the garden flows through the night. That one in Mixcoac, abandoned, covered with scars, was a body at the point of collapse. I was a boy, and the garden for me was like a grandfather. I clambered up its leafy knees, not knowing it was doomed. The garden knew it. It awaited its destruction as a condemned man awaits the axe. The fig tree was a goddess, the mother. Hum of erasable insects, the muffled drums of the blood, the sun and its hammer, the green hug of innumerable limbs. The cleft in the trunk, the world half opened. I thought I had seen death. I saw the other face of being, the feminine void, the fixed, featureless splendor. White leagues batter the peak of Ajusco, turn black, a purple mass, a great bulge splitting open. The rain squalls gallop covers the plain, rain on lava. The water dances on blood-stained stone. Light, light, the stuff of time and its inventions, months like mirrors, one by the other, reflected and effaced, days when nothing happens, studying an ant's nest, its subterranean labor, its fierce rites, immersed in the cruel light. I washed my aunt's nest body. I watched the restless construction of my ruin. Elytra, The insect's razor song slices the dry grass, mineral cacti, quicksilver lizards in adobe walls, the bird that drills through space, thirst, tedium, clouds of dust, impalpable epiphanies of wind. The pines taught me to talk to myself. In that garden, I learned to wave myself goodbye. Later, there were no gardens. One day, as if I had returned not to my house, but to the beginning of the beginning, I reached a clarity. Space made of air for the passionate games of water and light. Diaphanous convergences from the twittering of green to the most humid blue to the gray of embers to a wound like pink to an unburied gold. I heard a dark green murmur burst from the center of the night, the neem tree. On its shoulders, the sky with all its barbarian jewels, the heat was a huge closing hand. One could hear the roots panting, space expanding, the crumbling of the year. The tree would not give way, huge as a monument to patience, fair as the balance that weighs a dewdrop, a grain of light, an instant. Many moons fit in its branches, house of squirrels, blackbird inn. Strength is fidelity, power reverence. No one ends at himself. Each one is an all in another all, in another one. The other is contained in the one is another. We are constellations. The enormous neem once knew how to be small. At its feet, I knew I was alive. I knew that death is expansion, self negation is growth. I learned in the brotherhood of the trees to reconcile myself, not with myself, with what lifts me, sustains me, lets me fall. So I will stop there, even though that is quite literally not even halfway through that poem, mostly because it is quite literally not even halfway through that poem. And I don't know if I got the breath for that. Um, but yeah, if you've ever needed permission to just go off, like, just go on a rant that perhaps doesn't even make sense, Um, like, pause, uh, love him, but there are so many moments where I'm just like, "You really thought you were cooking with that, like, space is not space, but it's another space, and you are being in space and another being." Uh, like, I love it. I'm a sucker for it, but also, what does that mean? So please write your journals, write your pages on pages of just like, and the tangerines told me that the tangerines are the skin of the fruit of the world. The grass greets the tangerine falling from the tree. And if we catch the grass, then we catch the tangerine because in our hands is a tangerine. Um, anyway, I don't know why tangerine in that moment. So, I'm going to recuse myself on that moment. And I just want to say thank you so much for stopping by, listening to some poems once more. Um, I have said it many times, I've written it many times, and I will probably continue to say it many times and write it many times more. But poetry is community for me, and perhaps one of the only ways that I know how to connect with people. And so, by this nature of my giving you poems, I hope that you understand that I am also trying to welcome you and invite you to join in whatever world I have to offer. Um, so, thank you so much. Uh, I don't have any fun catchphrases to end this, but um, yeah. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sundays. And I will probably be doing this again on my regularly scheduled Thursday. Uh, I just had some personal business this past week that kept me from Thursday. So thank you so much and take care.